All right, we will get started with this Waterville Planning Board meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bruce, are you there? Just because we need you for a quorum. Okay, just making sure. Yes, sorry, start the webinar. I can.
I think I'm there.
I'll sign in here.
Oh, there's Cassie. So Hillary's a co-host now?
I think it looks like
Are you all set? Okay.
Thank you, Chad.
Perfect. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from July 25th. And I'm going to motion that we postpone that to our September meeting. I almost said August and didn't realize we're almost done that month.
I'll second the motion.
All right. We'll do a roll call. So, Tom?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Matt?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
And Cassie?
Yes.
Okay. Next is disclosure of conflict of interest. Do any board members have a conflict that they need to disclose on any of the votes that they're going to take tonight? Okay, hearing none. We will get started with Dennis Brockway is requesting a review for revisions to a previously approved site plan for self-storage units to be constructed at 112 Webb Road. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Jeff Allen from AE Hodson Engineers. And I brought my computer with me, so I'll attempt to share my screen and do somebody have to allow me to share?
She has to bring you into the meeting, but
Oh,
I'm on it. He's in as a panelist.
Okay, he needs permission, probably.
looks like I can do it now. So, back a few months ago, we had a project, Webb Road Self-Storage, which is at 112 Webb Road. And it says I'm screen sharing. Okay, I am able to see it there. And this was the layout that was approved back then. We had two self-storage units that are in a row, sort of going back from Webb Road. This is right up near the Oakland town line. Mr. Brockway built this first one, which is out closest to Webb Road, and now wants to change his plan. Instead of having them kind of lined up, he has another, would like to put them side by side. And so that's this configuration. So the square footage of the units are the same. They're just configured differently. This layout does actually have a benefit of having less impervious area. I think before we had 0.91 acres, and this is about 0.79 acres of total impervious area, which is less than the need for a DEP stormwater permit. And this layout represents a decrease of about 8,300 square feet less impervious. So there's less stormwater running off of it than what was previously approved. We've spoken with the city engineering department. We're also moving the driveway on Webb Road a little bit further up. In truth, I don't know if he's actually going to move it or not because he's got a driveway and culverts, everything in there, but This plan is showing it a little bit further up Webb Road. There's still adequate line of sight in both directions, and Mr. Lamarty from the engineering department has checked that and approved that. So all we're asking for tonight is just an approval for this modified plan that's a little bit smaller.
Any questions from the board? Jeff, where is the current driveway? You said it's.
The current driveway is sort of right where the cursor is here now. I'll make sure this doesn't slide off the table. It's right about in here.
Okay,
So it's about a 15-foot shift further up the road. So it's a negligible difference, really.
is there a reason why you're thinking of shifting it, or?
This allows for a little bit better, right now the driveway, you'd come in and just be staring at the side of a building.
Yeah.
This allows more direct access down the west side of those projects, or of those buildings.
Okay.
So-
If they move the driveway, Ann, do we have to do it again? So like if he decides to not move it, are we gonna have to come back?
Just leave what's there, you're saying he'll just.
He may leave what's there, there already,
And
which
that
is, it has
okay.
been approved already.
Okay,
The only reason we moved it was just to give, in this area that's shown with the dashed dotted line around here, we rezoned that, if you remember, the last time we did this. And I think he's planning on putting additional storage units in here at some point, but just wants to do the next one now, rather than a full build-out.
Will you,
We'll
oh,
see
sorry.
you again.
Oh, you bet.
Will you need any retention ponds or any stormwater?
For this,
Question?
for a small project like this, less than 1 acre, we don't have to have that. When we do additional storage or additional development beyond this, we probably will need a stormwater pond.
How does the water run off? Is it run off towards the?
It runs off to the east, which is toward the landfill, and
Okay.
there's a wetland area
East,
down
okay.
there.
Alright. Okay.
So there's nothing in the way there. Yeah, this is the old the old city landfill is this area down to the east of the current project.
so will you have to extend that road, Jeff, if he builds back more? I'm just,
Yes, yeah, we
Trying-
probably would extend this road back, and I think the configuration that we've talked about preliminarily is just having them parallel to Webb Road essentially.
Yep.
Back and forth across out back here.
okay,
But that's down the road. Don't know if that'll happen, so that's just the talking right now.
okay,
So, no water, no sewer, so.
all right. I do know that the city engineer approved the move of the road, correct, Ann?
Yes.
Yes.
And so we don't need to, do you just want us to take a vote and not worry about the findings and facts then? Okay. Motion to accept the change?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Tom?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Matt?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Bruce? Oh, I think I lost Bruce. Cassie?
Yes.
Okay. We lost Bruce. We still have five, so it's fine.
Yeah. And I did bring some copies of the plan, if you could sign that.
To sign them?
Yeah, and I'll leave those and pick them up from Ann's office tomorrow or the next day if we could.
Sounds good. Thank you,
just
Jeff.
All
have
right.
to remember to use black ink.
Black ink.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, our new city manager joined us, so if everybody hasn't had the opportunity to meet Brian, he's in the back, so thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Ron. I know I've met most of you, but anyone that's still left, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, great. Or tomorrow. I think I've gotten all of you, so, thank you. Appreciate the shout out.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Item number 2, Bosworth Group LLC is requesting preliminary and final site plan review.
Good evening. My name is Dustin Roma, civil engineer with DM Roma Consulting Engineers, and I'm just going to get set up here, sharing my screen. There we go. Yep, so we're here tonight, present a self-storage project, similar use to what was just in front of you here. These would be individual standalone drive-up self-storage units. We've got 7 buildings with just under 24,000 square feet of building area. All these buildings will be cold storage buildings, no heat, electricity, utilities will be run to them. The only utilities run through the site are just for some underground power that would run the security lighting that would be on the buildings, as well as the automated gate that we would install at the project entrance. We're going to have a paved site around all the buildings. We've got a driveway entrance coming in off of College Ave. That was the area that we kind of focused in on when we had our kind of preliminary sketch plan application the last time we had presented to the board. There was some discussion about the location of that driveway and kind of why we chose that area. There is a crest in the road right in that location, which kind of it's really the best area for sight lines coming in and out of the site. There was some concern about the proximity of that existing residential home that's immediately adjacent to that entrance area. The plans that we had submitted to you had that driveway entrance a little bit too close to the sideline, and brought that to our attention today. And we have agreed to shift that driveway entrance about 8 feet to the north, which provides the 20-foot separation to that sideline. This plan that we're showing here tonight just shows that driveway being shifted that additional 8 feet. We've got some evergreen trees proposed to be planted along that existing fence line that's there. And just to kind of reiterate, there is an existing solid wooden stockade fence that runs along that property line currently, and the evergreen trees will be planted on our side of that. We've designed a stormwater management system that collects all the stormwater through the paved areas and catch basins and pipes, drains all of that to the rear of the site as shown in this plan. We've got 2 under-drain soil filter basins that the water will convey to, that'll treat the water before it discharges off the site. So we've run the stormwater calculation to show we don't have any negative impacts on the site. City engineers reviewed the plan, provided the letter indicating he's supportive of the design. The site does require some earth grading along the back. It's kind of a fill site in through there. It's quite a bit higher than the land to the rear, so we're actually going to be cutting into some of that slope and regrading to create the flat plateau area for the buildings. We've also had to accommodate some off-site drainage that just kind of runs along the side property line, so we have provided drainage swales along the 2 sidelines that will kind of bypass those ponds, just so that we can continue to maintain drainage through the site that may be contributing from the adjacent properties. We'll have a sign at the entrance. I believe we provided a picture in our application just showing a similar facility that this applicant just recently built in Lewiston, which shows the buildings, the colors, the scale of the project, as well as that entrance sign. Be following all erosion control practices. We have submitted all these project plans to the DEP. We do have over an acre of impervious area, so they'll be issuing a stormwater permit for this project. Generally a very low traffic generator for this type of use, so we don't have any specific concerns about vehicles entering and exiting from the site. There will be some security fencing just along the College Avenue roadway. There's no need to fence around the rear of the site just because of the elevation changes We don't have any concerns there. And we've got a building on either of the two sidelines, which kind of provides fencing just through the use of the buildings themselves. So I think in summary, that's kind of, that's our proposal. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do you have any concerns about moving the road and the sight lines that would cause, or?
Nope, basically, we're kind of, again, right at that crest. I mean, 8 feet won't make a difference. If we had to move it 200 feet, then I think we'd potentially have some issues looking left, but, no, the 8 feet is fine.
Any other questions from the board? Anybody online?
I just got Bruce back.
Got Bruce back? Okay.
I got Bruce back.
Any questions from the public? Okay. Hearing none, we can move on to the findings and facts.
Sam, did you want to give Bruce the chance to vote on that last item, or should we just move on?
He's waving his.
I would support that last item. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but
That's okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. So 6-0.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Hillary, too.
No problem, Bruce.
Moving on to findings and facts. Have you had a chance to review the document that Ann gave you?
We have, yep.
Great. So I'll just say the number and you just say true or false. So number 1, development will not result in undue water or air pollution on or off the site.
It's true.
Number 2, sufficient water available for the reasonable foreseeable needs.
It's not applicable for this. We don't have any.
No water.
Yep,
Will not cause unreasonable soil erosion or the reduction in the capacity of the land to hold water.
that's true.
Number 4, the development will not cause unreasonable highway and public road congestion.
It's true.
Number 5, the development will provide for adequate solid waste disposal. No
That's
waste
not applicable
disposal.
as well. Yeah, there'll be no dumpsters. They're pretty problematic for these type of uses, so.
Number 6, the development will not cause an unreasonable burden on the ability of the municipality to dispose of sewage.
Yeah, we don't have
Not
any sewer
applicable.
connections either, so, yep.
Number 7, the development will not have an undue adverse effect on the scenic or natural beauty of the area.
It's true.
Number 8, the development is in conformance with zoning.
It's true.
Number 9, the developer has adequate financial and technical capacity to meet the above standards.
It's true.
And then we do have conditions attached from the fire department, access roads, making sure that there's a Knox box,
Yep, yeah, we're agreeable to all those conditions.
okay? And the stormwater conditions, which you already addressed. Comfortable with that?
We are.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to accept the findings and facts as written.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was me.
Matt, yep.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do a roll call. Tom?
Yes.
I am a yes. Matt?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
And Cassie?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, appreciate the board's time.
Did you bring that set for them to sign?
I didn't, just, I can get you one and I'll arrange to come up and get it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The next 2 items, Price Enterprises LLC is requesting informal pre-application review as well as rezoning. So we'll just do them all at once, Bill.
So usually I'm coming up here with paper, so you're gonna have to bear with me for a second. So I don't need to turn my camera on, correct?
Nope.
And you've got that covered, and I will go to share screen.
Just share screen. And
And-
even if it's just the aerial map showing where the panels are going, that's perfect.
Okay, let's start with,
Yep.
let's start with that. So good evening. My name is Bill Mitchell. I'm the owner of Price Enterprises LLC, which is the owner of 350 Kennedy Memorial Drive. I'm here tonight ultimately to ask you to refer me back to the city council requesting that a portion of this property be rezoned to airport industrial. Correct, Ann? So that I can install 500, a little less, 480 or 90,000 kilowatt solar farm on the back portion of the property that after an extensive review of options for that back parcel, I've come to the conclusion that the greatest and best use of this is the opportunity to install a solar farm. The solar farm would be used, about half of the kilowatt hours would be used for my own consumption. You may know that I own several buildings in Waterville, mostly commercial, a little bit of residential. And several of those bills are in my name, several are in tenants' names. And so about half the production from this farm will serve the CMP accounts that are in my name. The others, the remaining kilowatt hours will be offered to tenants to access power that's produced off this farm back to the grid, connected back to their utility bills to offset their consumption of power. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell. You can see on this first screen, I tried to highlight in black where I am relative to KMD and the airport road. And by the way, I apologize. Ann had asked me if I could bring an engineering drawing of this. You're not going to see that tonight. And part of that, the reason for that is there are a lot of moving parts to a project like this. And Revision Energy is the partner I'm working with, and I use the word partner loosely. They're not a partner in the truest sense. They're the vendor, the contractor that would be building the farm for me. And the minute I turn the switch on with Revision, I have to start paying them engineering fees and other fees. And I really don't want to do that until I know the city is going to get behind me and allow this zoning change before I invest a few thousands of dollars with Revision. So what you'll see tonight, I think, will give you the gist of what I'm trying to do, and hopefully enough that you'll be comfortable with what my ask is and refer me back to the city council asking them to approve the zoning change. So again, shows you where my property is, and as a point of reference, you may know where Subway is on Kennedy Memorial Drive, Portland Glass. That's the building we're talking about. And then this gives you a little bit of a zoomed in, a little more clear visual, again, adjacent to the airport and the airport road. And then this is what Ann was hoping I would be able to bring in an engineering report. And I'm sorry that I don't have that for you. But basically, you can see at the top of the screen is the back of the building that houses Subway in Portland Glass. The remaining portion of the site is where I'm proposing to build this solar farm. Now, what would happen is in an airport industrial zone, you know that there is a 20-foot setback that's required from the surrounding property line. So we would obviously adhere to that. It's required, not your requirement, but a requirement, I believe the PUC, and it may be a city requirement, to fence this in with a 7-foot fence. So, okay, so six foot, they tell me it's 7, but 6 or 7. But a fence would surround this in compliance with whoever the regulatory body is on that. So we obviously make sure we're going to do that. I will tell you that there is a sewer line. The city, Waterville Sewer District has an easement across the back of this property, and I've been working with John Jansen. John is completely in support of this. There are no issues there. I didn't bring one tonight, but happy to bring a letter from John when the time comes that we would maintain John's access, the easement access to the servicing, if ever needed, to the sewer line that runs through the property. The farm array would be built around that. Those are kind of the high-level points of the project. I'm happy to open it up to discussion.
Whereabouts is that sewer easement, Bill?
So if you look at the drawing, Sam, the upper, where the blue hash lines are.
Yep.
The upper right, if you see, it's sort of a diagonal tree line to where Irving is.
Yep.
So it follows that tree line, and you can almost see as you follow that through the blue hash marks, you can almost see a line there that comes back to what's called Aviation Road or something, where there's a group of self-storage buildings back there, but it runs diagonally across
So
the
they
property.
access it from that Aviation Road or?
Either side, either
They
side.
can do either side.
Either side. Right now, it's just an empty lot. Yeah, so we would have gates actually at each end of where that easement on the north and south side of the array.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Hillary?
The back of the property, it looks like there's some cars parked back there. Is that right? What I'm looking at the picture?
Adjacent near
Yeah.
where the building is, the
Yeah.
L-shaped building.
What is that building back there?
That's a self-storage building.
That's just the storage
And that's
building.
not mine.
Yeah,
That's not mine. So that would be the abutting neighbor in the back.
right.
And I'm guessing that that's just a vehicle
Got
that's
it.
parked
Yep.
on their property.
Yep, okay, fine, thanks.
You're welcome.
And it's the car wash, right? Up.
Yeah, so
Kinda up
Irving
on
is
the
to
hill
the,
there.
Irving is to the right. And that's all of their property, I believe, behind that leading up to that self-storage building.
Any questions online? Okay, any,
I have a question.
yeah,
Oh.
Tom.
Bill, I see those, looks like tall trees on either side, the left and the right of the solar farm. Are those all going to remain? Is that going to block the sun getting to the panels? Or how's
That's a
that?
great question, Tom. So we will need to clear most of the trees that are on my property.
Okay,
And as you look at that, most of those trees are on my abutters' properties.
okay.
So we will probably max out clearing, which I could do if I were putting a commercial building back there.
Right.
Which would be my next request to the city if this is denied. So either way, I'm clearing that lot. I'm putting something back there. But this makes the most sense. And the return on that, Tom, what's interesting, not that this is a critical part of the decision-making, but from a carbon footprint point of view, and I know you guys have been involved in discussions around solar, you probably know way more about it than I do. This little farm back there will reduce emissions 450,000 pounds a year of carbon monoxide being emitted into the air. So my reduction in footprint of fumes coming out of chimneys and what comes out of buildings, 450,000 pounds a year translates to 25,000 gallons of gasoline burned every single year as a result of this. So as much as I really don't like cutting trees down and doing that kind of thing, I think the bigger view of this is a massive reduction in my footprint in the city of Waterville, for whatever that's worth.
This property is up near the crest of the hill. It's on the high ground.
Correct.
Are people going to be seeing these solar panels when they get off the interstate, when they're coming up KMD? It's not going to be visible?
Not at all.
In any way? No?
Not at all,
Okay.
not in the least.
Okay. And if you're clearing the land, is Revision Energy, are they leasing that parcel? No? You're gonna-
I will own the farm.
Okay.
They're just the general contractor, if you will, that will be constructing it for me, but I will be the owner of the farm.
Yep. And then you essentially buy the power from Central Maine Power, the utility, is that?
Yeah, no, the way that works is, whether it's solar panels on your house
Yep.
or a solar farm, the panels generate a certain amount of power back to the grid.
Yes.
And so, I'll use a single-family home as the first example, and then I'll bring it back to this. So a single-family home that has panels on its roof has a CMP account associated with that house. And as that set of panels is producing power, it's metered backwards, if you will, going back out to the grid, and you're building credits. okay? And then those credits get offset as you're consuming electricity. It's all interconnected to CMP, all the wires, all of that is all interconnected. At the end of the day, they back it up through their infrastructure, bringing power in. But all you're doing is you put power out to the grid from those panels as you're building credits. And so you build up 500 credits or whatever it produces. And as you consume kilowatt hour credits through your use of electricity, it just offsets what you've built up for credits based on your usage. In a farm like this, because there'll be roughly 20 accounts associated with it, I have to tell them going in which 20 accounts are associated and what percentage of the 475,000 kilowatt hours they will consume a year. And as this farm is producing electricity back to the grid, each of those individual accounts will have their share of that 475 as credits, and then as they consume electricity, it just is offset from those credits.
So the plan is essentially to consume all of the electricity generated?
That's the hope.
back? Yes.
That at the end of the year, we net out about zero.
What duration in years do you foresee that going forward? Like other projects are like 20 years?
35
35?
is the life expectancy. That's the projection. 35 years.
Are these gonna be just static panels or the kind that move?
Static. I think most are, Sam.
Yeah, I know they have the fancy ones that move on 201 in Fairfield.
I'm not that fancy.
You're pretty fancy, Bill.
You know, and I know this is just my own digression. It's like, to me, it's like
Probably doesn't matter.
It's like a no-brainer
Yeah.
here. You know, this is such a like wow opportunity, you know, to impact, you know, on the environment and we're offering discounted electricity to our tenants. It helps me save some money so I can pay real estate taxes to the city. It's just a win all around. I know you have to do your due diligence and so forth, but I'm really hoping you guys will push this back to the council with a you know, yes, we recommend this, and then hopefully it'll be favorable from there. Because it's coming back to you again, I think. Right, Ann? I think I have to come back in the end.
For the final site plan,
Yeah,
1 through 7 checklist.
yes, exactly.
Bruce,
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. It was a pretty interesting proposal, and appreciate hearing those numbers on the savings too. And I think my question was already asked and answered about the life expectancy. I had heard in the past, and they've obviously improved because it was that 20-year time frame in the past, I think. But you said it's 35 years?
It's 35 years, and part of the deal with Revision, Bruce, is that I do a semi-annual maintenance contract, and more if needed, but they come in routinely, twice a year, inspect all the panels, inspect the array, the switches, transfer, all the stuff, the interconnectivity of all of it, and you know, make sure everything is running to optimum efficiency. It's monitored daily. If there's any issues with output or production or malfunction or whatever it is, they come in. There'll be warranties on the equipment, and then I'll obviously provide adequate capital improvement funding. You know, 10 or 15 years from now, it's like the shingles on your roof, right? You know, they wear out over time. Panels may malfunction or break down over time, but I would be prepared with adequate capital to make any repairs to the system if need be.
Bill, do you have to
Thank you.
add a road or anything to the rear of the property for the access, or just maintain the current easement?
Just maintain the current easement, Sam.
Okay.
And it comes wherever my property abuts to my neighbors.
Yep.
There's, I'm sure, an easement that continues across
on.
their
Yep.
property to go wherever that line runs. But I would always give the sewer district easement on the north side, behind the building, if for some reason there was a conflict in
Yeah.
back.
Okay. Any questions from members of the public? Anybody on the interwebs? Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to rezone this portion of the parcel to airport industrial. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We will do a roll call. Tom?
Yes.
I am a yes. Matt?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Cassie?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you all very
So
much.
the council will take 2 votes on the revision. It's a little ping pong that we play with them when it comes to rezoning.
I'll refrain from comment. But thank you all very much. I appreciate your support.
Great, thanks, Bill. Okay, and last but not least is item number 5, revision to the zoning ordinance to comply with LD 2003. So we discussed this a little bit in the last meeting. And you probably haven't had a chance to draft a ordinance.
Oh, I did draft all of the changes.
Mike Ian?
Oh, sorry. Unlike South Portland, which has a standalone ordinance, I made all the changes in the zoning ordinance. In other words, in the performance standards, in the definition sections, in each of the zones. So everything is
Okay.
done except for those 2 questions. I haven't changed that until you decide what you want to do with those 2 questions. Do you want to allow short-term residential rentals in accessory dwelling units? Everyone calls them ADUs.
Yeah.
And the other question is, how large do you want the units to be? I mean, you're allowed to set the maximum size, but not the minimum size. The state set the minimum size.
What was the state's minimum again?
I think it's 190 feet. 1 second.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's 100 square feet.
And Dan had said 750 square feet for a maximum.
No, what he said was 750 feet is the minimum, I think I've got that right, for a mobile home. And we've had requests already for, from people who wanted to put mobile homes on their properties in addition to their homes and use that as their ADU. And so I think Dan's feeling is that really wouldn't necessarily enhance the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So if you make the maximum size for an ADU somewhere under 750, then you preclude having mobile homes.
Okay.
Where ADUs are allowed.
One of the things I like about the South Portland ordinance is how they are very specific about, where the entrance to the ADU is and how it fits into the neighborhood and, matching the roof types and all of that. Is that something that are we allowed to put any standards in there, Anne, about buffering and?
If it's legal for them to do, I don't know. I guess it's adopted already in South Portland, is it? Or was that just a
Well, I think they have
suggestion?
more of a form-based code, but,
So it has been adopted?
yeah, I believe so. It's on their website. I'm trying to go through the changes here that you've added. We have a maximum of 1 per lot. Anne, is that?
Because you can't, that's what the state requires you to allow.
Yeah.
And then you can have as many units as you want, as long as you, after that first one, you provide the land area that's required
Okay.
per dwelling unit. So in the residential B zone, for example, you have to have 5,000 square feet per unit.
Okay.
So if you had if you had a lot that was an existing, in the residential B zone, the minimum lot size required is 10,000 square feet, but there are some legal non-conforming lots that are smaller than that. So if you already have a house on a lot that's less than 10,000 square feet in the residential B zone, you can have an ADU, but you can't have
an
second,
additional.
yeah.
Yep, okay. That makes sense.
So it's actually a second unit, but it falls under the ADU requirements.
Great. So I guess you want us to vote on whether or not they can be Airbnbs and the size?
So I don't know whether you need to vote now if you think you might want to add some more regulations, such as the ones you just mentioned in South Portland, or you want to go ahead and vote and get that part of it over with. The minimum size that I wrote in here was just a draft is 500 feet, so you might vote to change that to 650, for example, or 700.
Any thoughts on the minimum size?
Well, at maximum size.
The maximum size, sorry. Yes, Bruce?
Just a couple clarifying point. What's the timing on this again? Just
It
so
has
the
to be
public
done,
knows as well.
it has to be done before January, right?
Right,
January
it has to go
1st?
through the council, so.
And it still has to go through the council, so trying to, we're in September now.
Right. It is. So it is January. That's with the extension that the state gave.
Correct, yeah. You're the state,
Okay.
Bruce.
Right. And there's a lot of moving parts, obviously. So, and then secondly, I know you gave us the South Portland example. Are there other cities or towns that you've looked at that we may be able to consider as well?
Have any of you checked other towns?
I mean, you're welcome to do your own research. I found the South Portland one. There were other, in the article that you sent us, Bruce, there were other towns as well. I didn't find any current ordinances that had been passed. So that's kind of the tricky thing too, right? So
Yeah.
they're only going to be public if it's been passed.
Right. So when I made the proposed changes, those were just based on the state
Yeah.
law. So apparently South Portland added other regulations that weren't required by the state, such as one of them was you can't sell the second unit, you have to sell the two together, and then there was I think there was a requirement that the ADU or the existing unit be
in there.
owner-occupied.
Yep.
But I'm not sure how you could enforce that. I think that would be really tricky to enforce. But the sale, I had asked Bill Lee about the sale of the ADU, and he said that it would be rather cumbersome and expensive to set it up as a condominium if you only have 2 units, but I guess
Well, I think
maybe.
I would be in favor of having in our ordinance that it be, one of them be owner occupied. And I would be in favor of also having in the ordinance that they have to be sold together. Like it can't be subdivided.
Okay, but you're saying you don't care which one is owner occupied?
No, I don't care
Okay.
which one is
All right.
owner occupied, but I feel like the intent of the law is to offset housing costs, right, for people. So allowing landlords to increase accessory dwellings just to get another unit isn't offsetting their housing costs of the current owner. Like they can already create apartments and things within the,
The flip side to that
unit.
is, it's one of those situations where, let's say somebody's owner occupying like a first-time homebuyer type home with an ADU on it, and then they decide to, upgrade homes, move out, go to a bigger house. It kind of forces them to sell that property, otherwise they would have they wouldn't be able to rent it out, and that would kind of get somebody into the game of, having a second income with a rental or something like that, especially with low interest rates.
well, interest
if-
rates aren't low, but,
Well, I mean, sorry, with high interest rates, people not wanting to sell out of it.
but I feel like the intent of this law, right, is to bring on housing stock to make home ownership more available to people.
Correct.
So if people are not selling off their homes, right, the whole point is that
What
you
about
know,
being
I
owner
can put
occupied
a,
at the
hold
time
on,
of inception?
hold on. Well, after I'm finished,
Sure.
you can follow up. So, like, if I want to have my parents move in and have a in-law apartment on my land, right, which is something that, and under the way our zoning is now, isn't allowed in certain areas, right? So we've had issues where people have wanted to have their older parents move into their apartment or into their home as an accessory dwelling, an in-law apartment, and they were unable to. Well, if my parent moves out of their home, then they can sell their home and put a home in the market and increase housing in our market, right? So, I mean, to me, the intent of the law isn't so that a couple landlords can't buy up a bunch of houses and add accessory dwellings to increase neighborhood apartment dwellings, right? Like, I don't want this to, accessory dwellings and apartments are totally different things. And I think we have to be really careful when we're talking about that, right? Like, this isn't supposed to be, an accessory dwelling is a dwelling where someone isn't only living within that little place, they're also using the other home, right? That's why it's owner occupied. And I think that that's sort of the intent, right? We don't want to be renting out like a teeny little postage stamp to people and forcing them into that little thing. They're also sharing a yard and sharing all of this other stuff. It's to me, I mean, I'm very passionate about that.
And I
portion of
totally
it, so.
agree with the owner-occupied facet of it. I'm just talking about intent, so that where a landlord couldn't go in and just buy up properties, add them and sell them or rent them both out. If, when you purchase the property, you were owner-occupying it maybe for a specific period of time, and then had the option to rent out your unit or something like that.
But
If
that-
you added an accessory dwelling.
But that changes the purpose of your purchase. And that changes it, so again, as Samantha was saying, an accessory dwelling, by definition, is a piece of that big portion. And so the idea, again, is they are a cohesive unit that stay together. If you leave, they still stay together and no longer belong to you. It's not that you're acquiring property so that you can rent that property and amass more property as you go along. And so it's not so that someone who has money can go around and start buying properties, add cheaper properties to it, and then move on. It is, in fact, so that people can have an accessory dwelling so that they can have, again, maybe an elderly relative live on their property and they can help them out. But an accessory dwelling, again, because they're so small, are really not going to be like rental units that most people want to live in and like rental apartments. So it shouldn't be something that's really appealing to landlords in that regard, because it's not a property that you're looking to acquire,
No,
right?
and I understand that. I'm saying if somebody owns a home and adds an accessory dwelling, you know, down the road, they're looking to move on. I think that they should be able to rent their previously owner-occupied unit out.
But then you're looking at having rental properties, and that's not what this is.
Sure.
Right?
Okay,
And
but we also have a
yeah,
housing
yeah.
shortage, and I think that,
Yeah.
you know, it's a good.
Right, but they can sell their home, right?
Right.
And the new homeowner has a rental income on their property that helps offset their mortgage and gives them some rental income to help offset the high interest rates and the high rates of housing, or the high cost of housing. So, like, that's the benefit, right? And that's the incentive to sell it to somebody else so that they can have a
Understood.
starter home as well, right? That's kind of I feel like that is the intent of the law, from everything that I've read about it. And
But you raise a really interesting point, because obviously if I want to if I buy my home and then I want to move somewhere else, but I say, hey, I want to keep my home and rent it, I can do that right now. Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's a really interesting point.
Yeah, no,
It's just when we're thinking about adding these accessory dwellings, we want to sort of consider the possibility that people with money are going to start adding these and then moving on. And so it's this question of how do we balance, you know, allowing people to do something to solve a problem and dissuade people from acquiring properties to acquire properties.
Sure.
And so it goes back to what the intent of the law was. And I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying, yeah.
Well, and then the flip side is you sell your house, the people buying it want to move their parents in, so they kick the current tenants out of the accessory dwelling.
And they can, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what
So,
happens every time an apartment is sold.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, the code enforcement officers aren't going to be going around checking to see who's living in those units. So
Yeah.
I don't really think this is going to be enforced. You can ask, you can make it a requirement, but enforcing it is another issue.
Well, I think that we need to be very careful when we're saying that code enforcement isn't going to enforce our ordinances too. Like
Well, but
that's a
how
very
are they gonna
dangerous,
know-
very slippery slope
How are-
that we're going down right now.
How are they going to know who's living in there? The property will be listed under the owner's name.
Right. And we know you have to register your residence as well, right? You register your car to it, you vote,
Yeah, I've just seen it happen a lot of times.
No, I understand the issue. I'm just saying it's not really an excuse to not put something in an
Oh,
ordinance.
no, I'm not arguing
Yeah.
against doing it. I'm just saying realistically, it might not work out the way we're.
Well, how does
hoping.
South Portland monitor it then?
I have no
I mean-
idea. Maybe they don't.
It's in their ordinance, so it's not like I think that it's in a lot of the discussions and ordinances that I've read in my research, so I don't think that it's that revolutionary. Cassie, do you have a comment?
No, it's okay. Thanks.
Okay, does anybody else have any, Bruce?
Thanks. I'm just wondering, so we're going over quite a bit of stuff. Can we get everything in detail and then come back at next meeting maybe and vote? I don't think I'm ready to vote tonight on this because, I'd like to give it some more thought, do a little more research and I think that was the intent, that we've been thinking about this and moving it ahead a little at a time, so.
Well, to be fair, we did talk about a lot of these things in the last meeting as well. And so we had, prior to the last meeting to do some research, between the last meeting and this meeting, which has been a month, to do some research. So I would like to get this moving forward. I would agree we don't have something finalized that we're going to vote on tonight, but I think we should be giving guidance to Anne about these are our thoughts. This is what we want to see in the ordinance. Kind of a pulse of the group, because I would like us to vote on one in September and send it to council as the done date. Otherwise, we did an Airbnb ordinance for months and months and we just keep kicking the can down the road. We need to get this done. We have a deadline. There needs to be, a hearing at the council. We need to get it done. So I'm fine with not taking a formal vote tonight. I think we need to give a pulse of the group so Anne can make, give us something to vote on of what we're going to vote on finalized and send it to the council after our September meeting as the very latest. Yes, Cassie.
All right, so in that vein, just to bring in something personal, which I don't know if is necessarily appropriate, but I have had a recent experience of trying to buy a home in this town, and it was very difficult. Taxes here are pretty prohibitive. I think that allowing people accessory dwelling units to supplement their income is a great idea. But again, like what Sam was saying, and I think Hillary also was saying, that we have to be really careful about creating a situation where we are exacerbating the inventory shortage, whereby we are basically allowing landlords to create 2 units on a property. So I think that if what we're doing right now is discussing things that we should consider, I think that that's probably a pretty large priority. But I will also say that the taxes are pretty prohibitive in certain parts of town, and a lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people's taxes went up just now. So allowing people to have a system or like an ability to supplement their income, and allow them to stay in their homes longer while also contributing more housing to the town, to the city, is for sure our priority. But again, in doing so, we don't want to create the adverse effect where we're just encouraging people to buy out houses. And as far as Sam's saying about, or as what Anne was saying about code enforcement, not that code enforcement doesn't do their job, but it is hard to enforce. I live in a residential, I'm moving from a residential area that has quite a number of Airbnb properties that are rentals during the school year and become Airbnbs in the summer. Res A prohibits Airbnbs. So things like that, I don't know how code enforcement or how enforcement plays into that. But I think Anne is right that sometimes maybe code enforcement is so busy dealing with certain things that other things fall by the wayside. So we do want to consider what we're deciding here and how difficult it will be to enforce. Not saying that we should always assume that code enforcement won't enforce our codes, but I think that enforceability should be considered when we're with what we're talking about here. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, besides code enforcement enforcing codes, which I don't think we should be writing ordinances just assuming they won't be enforced, but the purpose of our building ordinances, right, is so that when an engineer submits a site plan, we have something to go off of it and approve, right? And they set a list of standards that people follow throughout the city. So if people choose not to follow those standards, then that's a different discussion that needs to be, had with code enforcement. But the purpose of our ordinances, right, is to enforce and have a set standard, right? And, we have ordinances that say you can't have businesses in Res A. We have ordinances that, measure out how big your buffers have to be between houses and all of that. And those exist so that when new housing is being built or when projects are coming in front of us, we have a set of standards in which to approve them. And that's sort of the purpose of the ordinances. So I think it's very disingenuous to say we're not going to put this in an ordinance because it's not going to be enforced, because that is a completely different issue. And that's not our job to determine.
I do think that it's not altogether when we are creating the ordinances, considering enforceability, not leaving things out or because we're afraid they won't be enforced, but actually putting things in that allow things to be enforced more easily, maybe. I don't know. As far as Airbnbs go and Res A, there's a whole website that lists Airbnbs and their address. So it's not like
it should not be difficult to be enforced. Yeah.
What's that?
I said, it shouldn't be difficult to know where they are. It's pretty clear. Yeah.
There's literally with pins on a very clearly marked website called Airbnb. But that's not really what we're discussing here. I think that it took me a better part of 6 months to find a house in the town that I already live in. And it was really hard. And only because I have access to financing and all of that was I able to make that possible. It is is hard right now.
And so I very much relate, Cassie, believe me.
And so that there are either other people on the board who can also relate or are really close to people who can also relate. And Yeah, I think it's a priority for all of us to really make sure that, and to make it clear to council that we all really firmly believe that, it's important to us that this doesn't exacerbate our issue, that it allows people who already live here to continue to live here, and allows people to not just monetize their homes, but what we want are people living here. Don't just want
Absolutely.
people who are coming and going every once a week. And, tourism is great, but like, that's what all the hotels are for. And that's what other already established Airbnbs are for. But it's really hard.
And in that vein, Cassie, I would add that, and I've said this before in meetings, and I will keep saying it, I guess, like and hammering down, we need to be creating all types of housing, and that's, housing for people that want to be homeowners but can't find a home right now in this city. And right now we have about 60% of our units in this city are rentals. And that's incredibly high for the state, like off the charts high. And I don't think that this ordinance should be creating more rentals. I think we need to be finding ways for people to purchase their homes and live in their homes and age in their homes and all of that.
But
it's creating a rental, but you know what I mean. I don't mean creating multiple rentals. So
say that
I think
creating a rent, like an AUD, is a way to allow people to stay in their homes too, that might not, be able to afford the increased taxes or whatever.
Yep.
High rates like this allows people to be able to buy homes too. So I think that I'm on the same page as you are.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think that's my concern though, is if we don't have something in there requiring the landowner to live in one of the units, then we're creating an issue where we're just increasing rental housing and losing more owner-occupied homes. And that's a major concern for me, not only as someone that lives in the city, but on this board and in good policy making. So.
Right. And the whole point of it is to make, part of the point is to make the housing more affordable, right? So if you're not living on you don't need more affordable housing if you're not living there. You know what I mean? Like, right?
I hear you.
Like if the whole point of having the auxiliary housing is to help the homeowner housing costs become more affordable, if they're not living there, then that whole argument is moot. So, right.
Exactly.
I think just that point itself reinforces the idea that it should be somewhat mandatory. Like whether or not that person is a snowbird and only lives there 6 months a year, like whatever, like you and I both know, like that's still your primary residence, right? And that's not, you Airbnb it out when you're living somewhere else 6 months out of the year, that's a different story. But that's not what we're talking about. Like the point is to make the housing affordable, your primary residence more affordable, and also to help contribute a solution to the housing shortage.
I agree.
I don't know that we answered Anne's question though about short-term rentals and how we felt about that.
Do you want to take a vote on just that one issue?
The owner-occupied?
No, the short-term.
Short-term rentals. Okay. Well, that's another discussion. So, how does everybody feel about allowing short-term rentals? Cassie.
So, again, if we're talking about owner-occupied with a secondary, it's already legal, right? Except for we're already allowing that, right? So if we have an owner-occupied situation and then say they rent their unit to a student who's only here 9 months of the year, and then the other 3 months they use it as an Airbnb, but it's a house, again, it goes back to the purpose of trying to help the homeowner supplement their housing costs. And in that way, you're not detracting from the housing supply, right? in any way because your house is still your home, right? And you're adding a unit to it versus moving out of your home and creating making that an Airbnb. We already allow Airbnbs in all of the town except for Res A, right? So, I mean, I don't really see how we could straight face being like, sorry, your auxiliary dwelling unit, which is supposed to be helping you supplement the cost of owning your home, can only be used for long-term like rental property as opposed to, I mean, that just forces people to choose, you know, one path when there are two paths that are available. And both of those are revenue streams that can help a person, you know, supplement their housing income. That's all I'm saying, you know. I don't, for me, that water is muddy. I think personally, I believe if I were to ever add a house, like, you know, like in the house I just bought, if I were ever to turn one of the bedrooms into like I don't know, whatever, but like that would, my personal choice would not to be to Airbnb it out. But if Airbnbs are allowed in residential B or whatever, then I don't see how you could prohibit that. Do you? I mean, like, what do you think?
Well, you're talking about different things, right? So if you want to rent out a room in your home as an Airbnb or something like that, that's different than an accessory dwelling, right? An accessory dwelling is an additional structure that you build with the intent of it becoming housing. And I mean, we've talked about how there's a housing shortage and it's really hard to even find apartments, let alone homes, right, to purchase. So it's a housing shortage for both sides. So if we're allowing Airbnbs that aren't occupied 100% of the time, is that solving the housing shortage? Because I don't think it is, right? So we could say it has to be a 30-day lease or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from for that, but I also feel like there are two components here, right? One is to try to add more units to help solve the housing shortage is A. And then B is also allow people to be able to, like, to afford houses that they might not normally be able to afford or stay in by allowing them to spend their income by putting, turning their garage into an Airbnb or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and if we're allowing, I mean, there's a capacity, you know, there will reach a point where the town is saturated with Airbnbs, like the supply and the demand there. So what might actually happen is if you allow people to put Airbnbs in their garages, then maybe the houses that are currently solely Airbnbs, you know, maybe that would be there would be less demand for that because of the supply demand issue. I'm just saying personally, if we allow in a Res B area for an entire house to be an Airbnb, why wouldn't you allow somebody to put another unit, another little building, like a shack in their backyard and rent it out as an Airbnb if that allows that person to stay in their house? I don't know. Yeah. I think if versus that person moving out of their house and just Airbnb-ing that large house forever. I don't know. Like, I'd rather have a family stay in the house than move to another town with their family and then just turn their house that they left into an Airbnb. Versus if there's a auxiliary unit and we require the house to be owner occupied, then we're at least ensuring that the primary residence is occupied by residents who live here. Just saying, like, off the cuff. I haven't put a ton of thought into that.
Something on that. I totally understand the point of not allowing it and trying to keep it as an accessory. The other thing we have to look at is it's very expensive to add these units. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of people running out and building $100,000 additions. But with interest rates, the way most people from an affordability standpoint are going to be able to build these, getting the supply in there, you know, they're going to take a second mortgage, they're going to refinance their house. which right now is very expensive. So renting out a small accessory dwelling might not actually cover that additional mortgage payment for a lot of people. But if they had the ability to do Airbnb, it allows them to cover that, at least for the time being, and then 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we might have a lot of single-family homes with these accessory dwellings going back into the marketplace. Somebody can buy it, have the accessory dwelling to make it more affordable, like to Cassie's point.
So going back to the intent of the law, the intent of this law and adding accessory dwellings is to get more units online as fast as possible, right? And if the new units that are being created are being used for Airbnbs, then that is not getting more units online as fast as possible. The other thing is, I think, I am not a banker by any means, but in my experience with like becoming pre-qualified and all of those things, it's not even always an option to use rental income as something as income towards your mortgage to be pre-qualified. So I can't imagine that a bank would allow you to use Airbnb, supposed Airbnb income that you have no idea what you'll generate from it. So I don't think that it's going to help people obtain financing or any of those types of things. I think that this is more of a, hey, I own this home, I have an opportunity to have my adult son and daughter come move in and have their own apartment as while they're getting, starting to pay off their student loans and finding their first home rather than renting. I think it's more of those types of situations, or I'm going to have, my parents come stay with me so that I don't have to worry about them shoveling off their roofs in the winter anymore. And, as they're aging in place and all of that, I'd rather have them close to me where I could take care of them and make sure, groceries are going and there's someone to bring them to appointments and all of that kind of stuff, I think is more of the intent of this. And then the other side being like, there are other rental opportunities too, right? Like there's no reason why if I had an accessory dwelling and my son or daughter moved out of it, I built an accessory dwelling for my son and daughter, they bought a house, moved out of it, I can't rent it to traveling nurses or long-term for somebody in the city and continuously have that income. But I don't think that the intent of this bill is to put on units that are just solely for revenue generating purposes to make someone else wealthier. I just don't think that that's the purpose of this bill. I really, truly think it's to bring more units online faster to solve a housing crisis that we're having and experiencing. I can't imagine anyone would put that much money into, I think some of these situations are completely hypothetical, right? But I can't imagine you're going to build $100,000 accessory dwelling unit and count on it being an Airbnb. I can't fathom an instance where someone would think that would be a great financial decision. I don't know why you would put that.
Financing though, so that's all I was saying. And people take HELOCs, that sort of thing, to do any type of home improvement. That was my only.
But why wouldn't they want to then rent that unit?
Well,
100% of the
and
time?
I agree. I think that is what the intent is. But like you said, if somebody moved out and then they decided they wanted to rent it to traveling nurses, maybe somebody short-term at Colby that comes in, that happens often. So, maybe a happy medium's like a 30-day minimum or something like that.
I think I would be very comfortable saying like a 30-day lease or something like that, 30-day minimum lease. That's no longer short-term
Right.
in I'm just thinking like, I don't want this to become like a constant revolving weekend
Yeah, and
getaway.
I get that.
And the other thought is, like I live in a pretty high-density district in Waterville, a very nice neighborhood, but it's fairly high density, and there's already quite a few apartments where you're allowed multiple units in our district. But if you have just a constant turnover, right, it really impacts the feel of the neighborhood, right?
Sure.
So like right now, I go on an evening walk and I know all of the houses that I'm passing and whose cars is what, and even though it's really high density, but if it's a constant change, right, you lose that neighborhood feel. And I think that that's important to keep in mind as well, right? We're talking about how this impacts different neighborhoods and all of that.
You've hit a lot of the points that I probably would have made. So I'm just going to hit them real quickly so I can just reinforce what you've said, which is, as we're discussing this, we do need to think about what the intent was rather than what we might want or what anyone else might want. We're responding to something that was created and constructed to solve a crisis, and we need to come up with some modifications that suit our needs as a city. We need to think about how those changes then impact the future of Waterville, both for current residents and future residents. So as Sam just suggested, short-term, might not be short-term, like 30 days might seem actually quite long, right? But when we talk about short-term, I actually think of short-term could be a weekend, right, for a lot of people on an Airbnb. When I think about I've purchased 2 homes in Waterville. I don't own 2 homes. I've moved from 2 homes. So I've lived in 2 homes in Waterville that my family and I have purchased. Each time, it was really, really challenging. It was really hard to find quality homes in a neighborhood that I wanted to move to and live with my children. And the first one was necessitated out of living in a rented home on Silver Street that was infested with fleas, right? We moved across the country with a family and 2 children and a cat, and we moved in and it was infested with fleas. I had to move with my children and move in with my family, and my family had to help us purchase a home because we had a home that was for sale in another state. And we owned 2 homes for many years, and my family helped us out for many years. And this was the reality of us moving to Waterville. And we are very fortunate to have had family that could help us, and we are very, very privileged. But the reality is that the housing market is challenging, and it is even more challenging today because there are people in their 30s that have to live at home because they can't afford anything. And rental apartments are really hard to find in Waterville that are quality apartments, that are kept up well. We know that we have a code enforcement officer who struggles. Yeah, we know all of these things. But there's no denying that as I was looking at homes in Waterville, if I had to have a home that was directly next to a house with an Airbnb that had a revolving door of people week in and week out, absolutely not. We would not have bought the house. We just wouldn't have. And if we knew someone was creating an ADU next to us now with the intent of having a revolving door, we would be listing our house tomorrow. If we want families to move to Waterville and create, neighborhoods where people have generations that stay as they have in Waterville, we need to think about what the intent of this law was created for, and sort of think about it like that. So we know that having elderly parents stay on your property is a wonderful thing. Well, wonderful for some people, maybe not for everybody, but wonderful for a lot of people. Or the idea of being able to have your children stay near you. Again, maybe not in your house. Yeah, how great is that? And then after they leave, the idea of having an ADU where you can make some extra income. But again, it's this like starter home or something temporary until you can get your feet under you and get something of your own. That is great. Or short term, like you said, for nurses, wonderful. But really, truly, something that's like a revolving door, for me, I would never want to purchase a home that had a constant Airbnb. When I do think of people who rent out their rooms in their house as Airbnb or like a floor of their house, I'm always thinking, well, maybe someone's living in it with them. And the type of behavior of someone in your own home is very, very different than the type of behavior in an accessory dwelling, something that's not attached in your home. Now, I know that there are homes that people leave and they rent them out. I get that. But again, it's a little bit different if the owner is right there. I know all of that, but that's just not the intent of this law. So I'm just not going to be a supporter of anything that's short term. I think 30 days is longer. I personally would like it longer than that, but I might be compelled for 30 days. But anything shorter than that, I'm just a no-go.
I would say too, a couple of years ago now, I know Bruce was on the planning board then. Tom, were you on the planning board when we did
Yes.
the short-term rental ordinance? So the three of us we had extensive conversations and had a lot of community members come and give compelling evidence, similar to what Hillary just said, about how they really felt uncomfortable having increased Airbnb or short-term rentals in their neighborhoods. That is one of the reasons why they're not allowed in residential A, because they were becoming a really big problem. The houses, the lots, everything in residential A is quite a bit bigger, and you had, like, they became like party houses. Yep. They were literally, there were literally people renting them for parties on the weekends. And it was becoming a big issue. Like, we live in a college town, so keeping that in mind, and so that is one of the reasons why they're not allowed in residential A. And I would assume if anybody had a neighbor in residential A that was operating an Airbnb, the code enforcement officer would be able to look into that for you. You know, he can't enforce what he doesn't see, so that is also kind of a part of the neighbor, right? You can check your zoning ordinances. We've had it happen a million times with the chickens. I don't know, were you on the chicken?
I wasn't around. I know about the chickens.
We were all on the chicken
yeah.
ordinance too, Bruce, and, you know, people came to the planning board and the city council and they said, hey, my neighbor's in violation of this ordinance because they have chickens and, like, I'd like us to look at this. And, you know, that started a discussion. So that's why we have these ordinances in place, whether they're enforced for everyone. Everyone doesn't always follow the law and everybody doesn't always follow the rules, right? Like, it's just, it is. Like, there are, if everyone followed the law, we wouldn't have any drugs being sold in our communities, right? So, it is what it is, but I think we have to be really mindful of that, and specifically in some of these neighborhoods, the high turnover of the Airbnbs has become a major issue in them. So I also would be in favor of something 30 days or more. Bruce.
Great, yeah, it sounds like we're reaching some middle ground here, so to speak, because when I first heard short term, I wondered, what does that mean? But I think it seems reasonable, a 30-day type of a thing, because you may have, like Hillary, I think, mentioned, and others have, you know, maybe you have an in-law or your child or something, and they move, and well, you want to get it rented out, so to speak, fairly quickly because of, like Cassie said, you know, the expenses, you're still paying for it, so taxes and whatever. So, and you don't, maybe that's going to be, somebody can come in for a couple of months, you know, and fill that until maybe you have another relative that wants to move in longer term. So I think it's really reasonable to say 30 days, and it seems like most of us are in agreement there. So I'd love to see us at least move in that direction.
Is everybody fairly comfortable with the 30 days?
Yeah.
So that would be something Ann can kind of put in there for us.
Do we want to come up with a suggestion for a maximum size? What about 650?
I think I agree with Dan's idea behind the 750, but at the same point, if we are looking to maximize housing, I think we should try and go to the upper level of that. My recommendation would be like 725.
Yeah, I can be fine with 725, 700 either, or
750 was the number for the mobile home?
That was for mobile home minimum, yeah.
I'm trying to think. I saw a segment on television last night about shipping container accessory dwelling units, and they're popping up all over. And I would be concerned if one of those popped up in my neighbor's yard, especially for a short-term rental. I think those run around 500 square feet.
I love them.
You love them?
I love them. Yes, I'm sorry. I love tiny homes.
Shipping containers?
Yes,
Yes,
steel.
there's-
725,
There's
725 seems reasonable. Me too.
Would that fall kind of under the trailers or something like that, or would that?
Oh.
I don't know if the single wide or the double.
Well, we don't,
yeah.
I don't think, we
Yeah.
don't have any, sort of parameters around.
No, we need to think about
Can we
that.
check with Dan on that?
Lot size requirement?
So for the first unit, Cassie, there's no lot size requirement. It's if you move up from there, right? So like Res B is probably the most dense, is it, Anne? Or,
Oh, it's not the most dense, it's probably the most common.
Most common.
Most of the residential part of the city is zoned residential.
okay, is the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. So, the first unit would have to be, wouldn't qualify, but then prior units after that would have to be,
Okay.
have what, 5,000 square feet per unit. Does that
Per
make
unit
sense?
of lot space, correct?
Of lot space, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the first, right, okay. Again, going back to Res B does allow for Airbnb, so I don't know how you can differentiate that. So if you, if you go away for 6 months out of the year and Airbnb your house and you have an accessory unit or an auxiliary unit, what are we doing? Like, what? I guess it's up to the council to figure that out. I guess, but like, my mind's just going and like, I'm compartmentalizing all of these different scenarios. Like if we really want to prevent Airbnbs, how do we do that? Especially in, like, it's easy in Res A because you're not allowed to have Airbnbs anyway. But you can have them in Res B. So how do we do that? How do we prevent
I see what
people?
you're saying.
So we can have somebody that is allowed to have I guess if we're going to allow auxiliary units, is there going to be an owner occupied requirement for the main house?
Or one of them, right?
For one of them,
Yeah.
has to be owner occupied. Yeah.
I mean, I think
Even
we should.
live in that allows for Airbnb, like one of the units has to be owner occupied. But then what do you do? So say I buy a house on I'm trying to think, Cool Street. I think that's Res B off the top of my head, or on Western Ave. And I have ADU, I can never keep that straight. And then my house is in Res B, so I can Airbnb that out all I want. What are we doing? Like, how are we preventing that scenario from happening?
Didn't you just all agree that you thought that we should not allow Airbnb type rentals, that we should say that they can be leased
Long-term.
for
But you
a
can't,
minimum of 30 days?
Airbnbs are allowed in Res B. Like, if I own a house in a Res B, I can Airbnb that out 100% of the year. There's no limitation. So if I
But-
build a,
So
whoops, sorry, go ahead.
So the difference is though, it's the existing structure, right? We're talking about adding a structure on the lot with like very limited standards of,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so-
a good point. For the ADU, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm
Yeah,
afraid I'm
go
going to
for it.
forget. The state law doesn't allow us to require any parking for the ADU.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of it. I forgot what the other point was.
Right. But again, okay, maybe I don't.
So if it
maybe I'm
were,
missing-
if it were an
But
Airbnb and without any parking, I don't think that's going to be helpful to the neighborhood.
I'm
If it's a
saying
densely
if you own,
developed.
in Res B and you make that and you have an ADU, what we had just said is that we were going to require that one of the units was owner occupied and the other would be a rental, right? But Res B allows for Airbnbs. So not only are you allowed, if you say you build an ADU, move into that permanently, you can add your own parking. It's not mandatory to have no parking, right? You could create an ADU and then like make your primary residence that what was once your primary residence is now like this very fancy Airbnb, and you've moved to a 700-foot house on your property where there's no setbacks, there's no there's no nothing. You don't have to have parking for like.
There's
now what we're doing.
There's nothing that prevents you from doing that.
Well,
There's not.
there kind of is, because in order to build an accessory dwelling unit that falls within the parameters of state law, in the fact that it doesn't need a parking spot, it doesn't have to follow any of the setbacks, it doesn't have to follow minimum lot size, all of those things. Like, they're going to have to file some sort of building permit, right? And when that is filed, you can require that it can only be used for housing, right? So it's totally different. Otherwise, it's going to be in non-conformance because you're adding a unit. Do you see what I'm saying?
All right, whatever. No, I mean, I think that right now, forget about the ADU aspect. Right now in residential B, you can buy a house and turn it into an Airbnb. The end. Never live there, anything. All right. Say you already own a house in Res B. You don't think you can stay there anymore. You can't really afford it. You are looking to retire. Instead of retiring, selling your house, moving away, now you just build a 700-foot small house, and then you decide to make your primary residence an Airbnb to be an income generator. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not pro that. I'm just saying we need to, like, if our goal is to prevent.
Because you're still going to have to pull a permit for the accessory dwelling unit that you're building to move into, right? So you could still require that the units only be used for long-term or 30 days or more of housing. So, because otherwise it's non-conformance, right? Because if you're building an additional unit in any zone, right, for Airbnb as it is right now, or short-term rental as it is right now, we're requiring at least one parking spot, we're requiring different setbacks, we're requiring a minimum lot size, we're requiring all of these things. So the accessory dwelling is a totally different, like, permit, basically, that falls within a different set of rules. Do you see what I mean? Like, they're more lenient in order to create infill housing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I understand Cassie correctly, Cassie's suggesting that the owner could move into the ADU and then turn the main property into short-term Airbnb, and there's nothing that we're creating that could stop that.
Because it's not prohibited, like right, I understand in order to have the ADU, you need to have one property, one unit be the full-time housing or owner occupied, right? And then you have the other unit has to be long-term, right? But also, so as soon as you have two units on your property, you're no longer allowed to Airbnb your house.
Well,
even if the zone that you're in.
No, because that's a totally different zoning. And do you think that you could maybe reach out to the planner in South Portland and see how they navigate that? Perhaps we have to add something to our current Airbnb ordinance, maybe, or to clarify.
Or like, right, or like,
hold on.
And where do we
just hold on
draw
one
the line?
second. Just please. So, if we could just, are you comfortable doing that, Anne?
Sure.
Yeah, and just see, because it's very clear in their ordinance, and I know South Portland had a massive problem with short-term rentals kind of eating up their housing stock, right? So, if we could just see maybe how that's navigated, and maybe we have to look into tightening up our Airbnb or our short-term rental ordinance down the road or something. But
Yeah, like if
we
I
don't
go on
want to have
vacation.
unintended consequences.
Right. But also too, you don't want to prevent like homeowners, if they go on vacation for a month, they should be able to Airbnb their house if they're gone for a month. I mean, if they're in a Res B, but it's what we want to prevent is our people from like taking advantage of something that's supposed to be a housing solution and turning it into like a money-making process for them that still detracts from the housing when we're trying to generate more housing. That's all.
Yeah, so maybe we can clarify with that. And I can reach out to, is it DECD that's doing this, right? Heather
Yes,
Johnson? Yeah, I'll reach out to their office and just
And I
see-
can give you the name of the
yeah,
person.
see if they have any other ordinance idea,
Yeah.
other
yeah.
cities.
I mean, I find it unlikely that most homeowners would make a choice to move into the ADU and then have constant short-term Airbnb rental of the
There
main
was something
property.
on the internet about somebody
Yeah.
who did that.
But if it happens,
Hillary.
we should try to, yep,
Hillary,
We
you
do
live
want
right
to make
now.
sure
You
that we
live
don't have unintended consequences.
exactly.
I don't think it's unavoidable, but we could
say
try.
that, but right? If you go over to certain parts of town, there are so many apartments in certain buildings. There are people coming and going all day long anyway. I don't know, like maybe if it's because you live over where you do that, like you can't imagine that there are parts of the town where there's traffic.
No,
people
what
coming.
that's not what I said. What I said is I have a current resident who would build an ADU and then move into the ADU.
What about all of the people who turn their homes into like multi-unit apartment buildings and choose to live in one? That's like the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's the exact. So I
But
mean,
they're
I just
already in
being like
conformance with zoning.
imagine people.
Right.
It's not,
Like they're already in conformance with zoning, they're already required parking requirements.
Right.
Like they're already in conformance with zoning if they do that. We're talking about a situation where like the ADU standards are much more lenient than our current zoning standards, right? So we want to make sure that we're not having unintended
Right.
consequences of allowing
absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
No, I
things that
think it's a
aren't
really
in
good point,
conformance with
Cassie.
our zoning like pop up
Yeah.
that are supposed to be in infill housing and end up being not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you do understand that all the residential areas in this town, except for the Res A, which is where I live and where you live, or I lived and you live,
Right.
where else has that like option to have, Airbnbs, and you can have like you could rent every room in your house out as an Airbnb. There's
Right,
no
Cassie,
limit.
But
like,
you
could-
understand that all of those units have to be within a stringent set of zoning, right? Like, and the ADUs are not, to build the ADUs would not technically be in conformance with our zoning the way it's written now, right? So the point is to be able to infill and add more density with ADUs, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
Right. Saying like I can already do it now, yes, but you have to meet these requirements, right? So saying that you should be able to do it with your ADU when you only have to meet these requirements isn't.
Should be able to do it. I'm sorry. I think that it should be clear that we're saying the same thing. What I'm encouraging is that we are careful with our language where
Yes.
we're like, well,
Yes.
we need to make sure that the things I'm talking about can't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And like that we like already in a Res B, you can turn your house into an Airbnb. You could Airbnb every single room in your house, which
Right.
means there's 12 different houses, different rooms that are being Airbnb'd out, right? There are no regulations to prevent that. So I'm just saying we need to consider all of those possible scenarios in conjunction with what we're dealing with. Like Res A has protections in place that say you can't have an Airbnb in your house already. So that makes the process a lot easier for that one particular like zone.
Right.
But all the others there are caveats. We're all on the same side. I'm just talking about all of the ways I'm thinking about, well, how could I take advantage of this? I could do that, you know? So if I can think of it right now, somebody else will think of it later, and also probably a million other things that I haven't thought of, or that we haven't thought of.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll reach out to DECD and we'll reach out to South Portland, and I encourage everybody else to do their own research if you feel free,
And
and look at what other towns, cities, municipalities are doing. There are very small towns that are looking into this. You know, Bruce sent along a great article, a couple interview by Maine Public Broadcasting a couple weeks ago. It was a really great listen if you want to listen to it.
Do we want to come up with a maximum? I heard 700, I heard 725. Going once, going twice. Sold.
I am not, I don't feel strongly about the 25 square feet. So I'm fine with
700? Do we just want to say 700 for now, and then if you want to look at those containers and see if you're concerned about them?
Why don't
Yeah.
we say 700 and, I mean,
700 square is a pretty big house. It's pretty big space.
Yeah,
it's a big tiny house.
it really is.
It's a really large tiny house.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
I would encourage board members to look at, you know, what is 700 square feet gonna get you as an accessory dwelling? Like, what are other cities doing? What might that look like in, you know, driving around in different yards? Is that an appropriate size? So,
Matt's ready to adjourn.
yeah, I am so ready to adjourn. I will motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay. Bye, guys.